In this video, we'll have a brief introduction to how to name acids, and then we'll take a look at a few examples. We can divide up acids into two categories: acids that contain 2 elements and acids that contain 3 elements. Here are the rules. For acids that contain 2 elements, we'll be using the prefix hydro and the suffix ic. For acids that have 3 elements, we'll be dealing with a polyatomic ion. We're going to have to look at the ending of the polyatomic ion. If the polyatomic ion has an ending of 8, we're going to change that to a suffix of ic. If the polyatomic ion has an ending of ite, we'll change that to a suffix of us. So 8 goes to ic, and ite goes to us. For example, this is HCl. Notice that there are only 2 elements here, hydrogen and chlorine. So add the prefix hydro and the suffix ic. So this would be called hydrochloric acid. There's hydro, there's ic, and then I guess we also have to add the ending of acid as well. Let's try another one. We have hydrogen and sulfur. Notice there's 3 atoms. There's 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of sulfur. But this doesn't say atoms up here. This reads elements. And there are only 2 elements here, hydrogen and sulfur. If you see something like this with hydrogen, there's a possibility it's an acid. And since we just have hydrogen and sulfur, that's 2 elements. So we know it's going to start with hydro and it's going to end with ic. And this element is sulfur. So hydrosulfuric acid. Now let's look at an acid containing 3 elements. We have the element hydrogen, the element sulfur, and the element oxygen. So now we're dealing with acids that have 3 elements. We have to look at the polyatomic ion ending. You should recognize SO4 as sulfate. So once again, SO4 minus 2 is called sulfate. And sulfate ends in 8. So what we're going to do is we're going to change 8 to the ending ic. So now this acid, H2SO4, is called sulfuric acid. Not sulfate. This is sulfate. This is sulfuric acid. So change 8 to ic. This is H2SO3. You'll recognize SO3 as the polyatomic ion sulfite. Sulfite ends in ite. So let's just change ite to us. So this is called sulfurous acid. So once again, if there's 2 elements, it starts with hydro and ends with ic. If there's 3 elements, you have to look at the end of the polyatomic ion. If it's 8, we turn it into ic. If it's ite, it gets turned into us. Here's a few more practice examples. Why don't you pause the computer after each one of these and try to name them yourself. So the name of this, HBr, should be hydrobromic acid. 2 elements, so it starts with hydro and ends in ic. What about this one, hydronitric acid? Well, it starts with hydro and it ends in ic. If you see an acid that starts with hydro, you know there's only 2 elements there. So which 2 elements do you think they'll be? Well, of course it will be hydrogen and nitrogen. And how many of each do we need? Well, hydrogen has a charge of +1, and nitride has a charge of -3. So if nitride has a charge of -3, we would need 3 hydrogens to balance that out. So this is hydronitric acid. What about this one here? You'll recognize this as nitrite. You know that ite gets changed to us. So this should be nitrous acid. All right, in this next example, this is ClO4. This is called perchlorate. Perchlorate. It ends in ate, so that's going to be changed to ic. So it's called perchloric acid. This is perchloric acid. And let's try one more, phosphoric acid. Does it start with hydro? No, it doesn't. So that means it's going to have 3 elements. Obviously, 1 will be hydrogen, and then what type of polyatomic ion do you think this is? If it's called phosphoric, that means it probably came from phosphate. And phosphate is PO4 minus 3. So if it's PO4 minus 3, and hydrogen has a charge of +1, we'll need 3 hydrogens. So this is phosphoric acid. And we'll have plenty of practice with these in class. So I know this was quick, but all of these naming rules do take some practice.